Spokane listens when business talks. Welcome to Business Talks, the region's only local business talk show with your host, Ryan McNeice. Business Talks is brought to you by our friends at STCU and Well Dressed Walrus. Now, let's get down to business with Business Talks.
Welcome to Business Talks. I'm Ryan McNeice, and we're here in the studio with Neal Boling, KHQ Station Manager. Thank you for being here, Neal.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. I appreciate it.
The topic really today that I wanted to cover is the unique opportunities, on a positive note, and the challenges in the broadcast world. But before we get into that, tell us, Neal, how did you even get into this industry to begin with?
Well, I grew up in Tampa, Florida, a long way away.
So natural you'd be in Spokane, Washington.
Yeah, exactly. It's hotter here, I think, right now than it is in Tampa. Anyway, my dad was always the one to sit down and watch the evening news every single night. And then, it was the local news followed by the national news. And for me, it was Peter Jennings. I was just in awe of what kind of anchor he was. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, when I grow up, I want to anchor the news with salon quality hair. And I never really let go of that vision. I mean, it was to the point where some would call me obsessed. I was busted in fourth grade, and we were all supposed to be quiet when they turned the lights off in the cafeteria, and a friend of mine, we were humming the local news music for the
catchphrase or the catch music. Yeah.
Exactly, and trying to guess which station it was. And I knew then that I had problems. And then in sixth grade, my dad actually had to disconnect cable because I wouldn't stop watching the Weather Channel. And, back then the Weather Channel was just on a constant loop all the time, but I was obsessed.
Maybe potentially a bit dry as well.
Yeah, so dry. There you go.
Yeah.
So I got into high school and I became the editor of my school newspaper, and I was kind of torn. Do I want to go down the newspaper route? Do I want to go down the
/broadcast?
Yeah, I just knew I loved the news. More than anything, I loved the news. So I went to the University of Florida, which had a tremendous broadcast program there, and they also have a pretty good print journalism program. And I thought, well, I'm going to give this TV thing a go. And I was still kind of hanging on to the dream of being a news anchor. I don't know why, but in order to be... Yeah, Peter Jennings. Yeah. But by that point, I'd started reporting, which is what you need to do in order to become an anchor.
Right.
And I found that I just absolutely hated reporting, mostly because, and I don't know if many people know this, but TV journalists are almost required to talk to the non-PIO, the non-public information official. And you want to talk to the real people and get the real story that's out there. People don't want to talk. They don't want to go on camera that, well, what if Marcy sees me with my hair not done like this, And it was just always like arm twisting to try to get people to go on camera. And I just found I'm a control freak, and I did not like the lack of control. So somebody said, well, why don't you try being a producer? I'm like, a producer? What is that?
Where does that fit into the puzzle?
Yeah, exactly. And I tried it, and for those in the audience who don't know what a precise job title of a producer, think of a producer as like the architect of a newscast. They're building a blueprint that everybody has to follow in
work
order
within
to
that schematic.
Exactly. The director, the anchor, the audio person, everybody is following this sketch that you've laid out. But then even deeper than that, you have to write the entire newscast from beginning to end. And I loved writing, still love it to this day, even though I don't get to do as much of it as I used to.
But that's where that early newsprint
desire
was as well.
Exactly. So, and I could be completely in control of the product. I mean, from soup to nuts, I controlled it. And I found that I just loved that job. It was just such a great position for me. So naturally, I'm in station management now, where I get to do none of that.
That part I really liked.
Yeah.
I don't do any of that. No,
yeah, exactly. So I graduated from the University of Florida, became essentially an overnight producer at the CBS station in Tampa, and it was somewhat unusual to move to a large market like Tampa.
Right off the bat.
And Tampa and Seattle are very, very similar in terms of market size. I think right now Tampa is the 11th biggest TV market. Seattle might be the 13th or 14th.
That's interesting. Demographics are similar.
Yeah, just the overall population and total number of TV viewers. So I had that overnight job, which nearly killed me. You bad bosses and horrible hours, but I'm really grateful for that experience, because to have that at the beginning of your career,
Right.
It just it's all downhill from there.
Well, it kind of allows you to ascertain what you like, what you don't like, why I like it, and what direction you want to pursue.
Exactly. So I was never under contract, which was also kind of unusual. So after about 2.5 years of suffering, I jumped ship and I went to the NBC station in Tampa, and I rose through the ranks there, became an executive producer, and then finally we'd had so many hurricanes in Florida, and the cost of living there had gone just through the roof. It was ridiculous. And I thought, I think it's time for my family to pick up and go
Try something
elsewhere.
different.
And we had our first child, my wife and I at this point. We had a young daughter, and Florida seemed to be ground zero for every, horrible sex offender. And it was just like, we need to get out of this place.
Yeah.
Even though I'm a native, I'm done with it. So we moved to Tennessee to become a news director. That was a news director is not the person who's directing the camera shots and that sort of thing. They're actually in charge of managing the entire news department.
Right. Literally directing traffic, so to speak, in the
Exactly.
newsroom.
What stories do you have to cover? What discipline do you have to dole out? What kudos do you need to do to inspire and motivate the different people? And I really enjoyed that job. And, Eastern Tennessee, the Tri-Cities area of Tennessee, a beautiful place. But, for a young family, there's just not a lot to do there. And I'll never forget, I was sitting in a department head meeting in Tennessee, and I got a news alert that it said, Jonathan Mitchell, news director of KHQ in Spokane, moves to KNTV in San Francisco, San Jose. And I thought, wow, that's a big market jump for, you're going from Spokane to
San Jose?
San Fran. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
market 5. What? Spokane? I thought that was a suburb of Seattle. I've never even heard of the
just
place.
right out there by Ritzville?
Yeah, exactly. So I started Googling it, and I discovered, Spokane. And then I started looking at KHQ, and one of the really appealing things for me about KHQ was that it had a private ownership. I was used to, at that point in my career, a very top-down, corporate-heavy, system where they want to homogenize the product all across the board. So if you're in Macon, Georgia, it's going to look the same as Spokane, Washington. There's some advantages to doing it that way, but I think that what this market has shown is that each market has its own individual taste and its own individual flair.
And you do think the private ownership piece plays a pretty big part in that?
It's wonderful. It's liberating because, we're basically granted the freedom to take the risks and to do things. Our ownership does not, they don't call us and say, okay, now what are you doing? It's basically like, yeah, we pay you to run the place.
Not a
you run it.
helicopter management structure, but rather we've hired the best, go do what you do.
Exactly. And it's just incredibly liberating to be able to function at that level. I look at this as like, nirvana for broadcast TV terms. And it's funny because when I've had to do job postings, on a nationwide basis, I underscore the beauty and the wonder of Spokane,
Right,
but I
living
also
in
talk
Pacific.
about just, what the station is like because it's so unique in the broadcast industry right now.
And that's an interesting concept across the board in corporate America is when you are essentially selling to potential employees. Not only were you somebody on the other end of that in Tampa looking inward at Spokane, but sometimes it's tough to sell something that you don't know until you're there.
Right.
The beauty of Spokane environmentally, of course, but as you said, maybe the fabric of working at KHQ until you've lived it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Obviously, you can speak to it, and you were.
Exactly. I mean, and I think that I'm able to relate to a lot of candidates, especially from the Deep South, who would be like, Spokane? What is that, all about?
Yeah.
But it's not only the Spokane surprise, as I call it, like the Riverfront Park and all of the great things that we have to do here, but it really is that corporate environment where people can be free to be creative and you're not stifled, at the top. There's a certain broadcast company that shall go unnamed right now, but they've been in the news a lot lately because of what they call must-run content. And they basically originate from DC, like if it's a particular style of segment or whatever, and regardless of what market you're in, you're forced to run that content. And that kind of thing would just drive me berserk.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, from a creative level, to feel like you're coming up with some potential nuances and new ideas and then not be able to run with it.
Exactly. Yeah. Stifling. Just totally stifling.
But circling back to the beginning, to a certain extent, the idea intrigues me that you knew right off the bat that you had a sincere passion. And many times with guests that I have and nonfiction that I read and I'm passionate about, that is a common denominator. Is this, you actually said, I think you used the word obsessed. I think that word is used all the time in people that are achievers. Dare I say maybe overachievers, but the point is an achiever oftentimes has to have a thread of kind of that OCD quality that you're obsessively identifying with, whether it be the nightly news or what your dad was watching, and your example of being at the school and trying to identify the jingle. That fascinates me because you actually do see that throughout many professions, that people tap into something early on that they just say, this is what I'm going to do.
Yes, I'm fortunate in that regard too, because I've also seen the opposite where people are like, no clue what I'm going to do.
Right.
And, for me, I've been on this trajectory essentially, from day one.
But that focus, that direct focus and obsession, if you will, has allowed you to play at very high levels in this industry. Let's take a quick break, but when we come back, I do want to touch on some of the opportunities that you foresee in the industry, as well as some of the challenges that are really hitting the broadcast industry. We'll be right back after a short break.
The following is sponsored by our friends and community supporters at McNeice Wheeler Attorneys. McNeice Wheeler is a boutique law firm in Spokane, handling matters in both Washington and Idaho. Areas of law include business law, wills, trusts and estates, family law, personal injury and wrongful death, and real estate matters. For your full-service legal needs, contact McNeice Wheeler Attorneys.
I'm Nikki Butler, and I'm a regional manager for STCU. My lunch buddy is Nicole.
I'm Brandy Schloss. I'm a regional manager at STCU. My lunch buddy is Angelina. She's grown up with me. I've grown up with her. To see her graduate will be a lot of fun.
Brandy and I have been lunch buddies since the girls were in second grade. It's great that STCU provides me with the opportunity to be part of Reach for the Future. We are committed to the children. We're committed to our community. I'm Nikki.
I'm Brandy.
And STCU is here for good.
Hi, I'm Larry Myers, owner of River Ridge Hardware. Welcome to our garden center here on the corner of Garland and Driscoll. We have fresh plants that come in weekly from all of our local growers. We can make your garden look like our garden. Here at River Ridge, we've been here 30 years. We're your full-service neighborhood hardware store. This is our sprinkler aisle, where my knowledgeable staff will help you put together your sprinkler system so it will make your yard lush green for the spring and summer. This is River Ridge Hardware's rental center, where we provide a multitude of equipment for rent for the do-it-yourselfer. Next time you're working on your home or yard this spring and summer, stop by, say hi, and we'll help you get the project done.
Welcome back to Business Talks. I'm Ryan McNeice, and we're here in the studio with Neal Boling talking about KHQ and the opportunities and challenges in the broadcast industry. Thanks, Neal. In the first half, we were kind of really digging into how someone in your position and in this career, how you find your way from the different markets in broadcasting, and thankfully you found your way to Spokane, Washington.
And if anybody's still watching at this point, I would be amazed,
Oh, the millions. Millions are out there. Let's talk about, let's start with the glass half full and talk about what do you see as some of the unique opportunities in broadcast? Because media out there, I mean, you can't pick up a Wall Street Journal or New York Times or any major newspaper, Spokesman Review discussing downfall of broadcast or whether it's a newspaper business or what have you. We can all talk about negatives, and we'll touch on some of that. What are some
much of that, right?
Yeah, but let's touch on some opportunities.
Well, there's never been a greater hunger for content, and especially when it comes to local content. And that's the bread and butter of your local broadcaster. You know, we're deeply in touch with the community.
Right.
Delivering the content on all of the different platforms that we need to get it out there, and then monetizing those platforms, that's the challenge. But it's also a tremendous opportunity because no one has figured this out yet. No one has cracked the code. Similar challenges, obviously, in the newspaper industry. So I think that, we're well positioned as a broadcast outlet to satisfy that community's hunger for local news and information. And also,
And is that a versus grabbing national negative news potentially that you think just flat sells?
Right. I mean, the whole if it bleeds, it leads kind of thing. I mean, we could always go down the political path and that sort of thing. But I attended an interesting...
we got Fox News and CNN for that.
Well, right, exactly, and Ted Koppel calls that news you can choose, and the ideological split that is facing viewers right now, who don't know the difference really. They don't realize that they're in kind of a news echo chamber on the national level.
For sure.
That's something that troubles me deeply about just the overall industry, even though local is largely insulated from that. I mean, I know I've done my job when I get complaints from both sides that we're too biased for one way or the other.
I agree. It means you're covering both sides.
Exactly. It means that we've done it fair, because there is no place, in my opinion, for opinion in local news. I mean,
and unfortunately, I will editorialize to a certain degree. Fox or CNN literally is just that.
Right.
As you said, you pick one or the other based on your
preconceived notions. You're subscribing to whatever news source reinforces your belief system.
You're not challenging a belief, you're just reinforcing.
Exactly, and I don't think that that's a good service to America. I mean, we all have our opinions, but somebody once told me, don't debate an issue unless you are prepared to debate it from the other side.
Right. It's not a debate if you're not able to do that.
Right, exactly.
And interestingly, that's a fair comment, because you're not saying it should be Fox or it should be CNN as an example, but rather you should have a debatable issue. But if you're not seeing both sides or even getting both sides of the story.
Right, exactly. So, I guess I delved into the challenges already, the glass half.
How did we go to... This is supposed to be upbeat.
Yeah.
No, but good point. With the opportunities comes the challenge.
Right, and at a local level, once again, we're insulated from that, but people, we have local Fox affiliates, and it's like, okay, is the local Fox affiliate part of Fox News? There's a confusion about that.
Right.
NBC, are they part of MSNBC, which is traditionally viewed as more of a liberal source? It's kind of the wild, wild west when it comes to this.
So almost a bit of a brand identity issue to a certain extent.
Definitely, and in fact, I had the opportunity to attend a conference in Vegas not too long ago where they had the three main network evening news anchors together for the very first time: David Muir from ABC, Lester Holt, and Jeff Glor from CBS. And Lester came to a reception later for the NBC affiliate stations, and I said, "Do you ever worry, Lester, that essentially your brand is being tainted by MSNBC, because you'll even go on MSNBC and that association. And he goes, no, because we fight very hard for our evening news to be right down the middle, and I think the consumers can recognize that. I don't know if I agree with that. I really don't. There's times where I hear things coming out of network correspondence on our air and on our competition's air that I'm like, that's an opinion. That's you're leaning towards a certain ideology when you say that.
More editorial.
Exactly. So I don't know. It's
a piece that you mentioned earlier though, in terms of concentrating on our local market and our local community, and figuring out a niche in terms of accommodating that and having individuals really want to see that local content, and paralleling that with marketing and advertising. How is that done?
Well, for one thing, we have to win in that race, and that is, and I'm pleased to say that KHQ, takes the lion's share of the ratings and therefore the revenue out of this market.
And so the ratings leading to the opportunity to sell advertising.
The more people watch, the more people, watch, and therefore, can see an advertiser's product.
Yep, makes sense. One lead, very correlated.
Exactly. Now, to get to that glass half empty model,
let's hurry and continue to be negative.
Yeah, exactly. It is just so fractured right now. And, like I talked earlier about watching the TV news with my dad, sitting on the sofa, and that was the sole focal point of our attention. Well, now we're lucky if you're even just watching with an iPhone in your hand, and in that case, we're the background. We're the second screen. We're not the primary screen.
That is so true. I would imagine your family is similar to mine, that you're all sitting around on the couches and the chairs, and you're right, you got the screen right here doing the nightly news, and each of you are on your respective devices.
And it's fascinating, too, because what I try to impart to our news team is that if you're on Facebook and you're using that as a source of news, which I would also argue kind of subscribes to the echo chamber effect, because you're only getting the news that you want to see.
That you're clicking on, that is repeating itself in the algorithm.
Exactly. You're primarily watching. You're hardly ever clicking the sound up, to listen to the audio from those videos. I think the ratio I've seen is about 85% of people watch and only 15% of people are listening to those stories.
That low? That's shocking, actually.
I would argue that on the broadcast level, it's the exact opposite.
You're hearing it and not looking at it.
Exactly. And that's why, our producers, our talent, they're all trained to try to grab your attention and get you to actually engage with the television so that you're not distracted.
Right.
And I think we do a better job than most at doing that, but we recognize, especially in the morning, you're doing other things. You're trying to get ready, you know.
You're doing dishes or you're walking by, but you are hearing it.
You are hearing it, and something will get your attention, and it's kind of like radio just with TV, you know. So
that's true. That's the psychology of the nuances that you're hitting are fascinating. And you're delving into it all day long, all week long, seminars, etc.
We're marinating in the psychology of the whole thing.
Of how to reach the end user.
You know, and a couple of things have hurt our prime time. One of those things is Netflix, because you know, no commercials. You just binge. You can go straight on through it, and before you know it, you've fallen asleep. They even came out with a design for socks, because people were falling asleep watching Netflix, and the socks knew when you would fall asleep, so that it would discontinue the stream.
You've got to be kidding me.
Netflix and chill socks, I think, is what they were called.
Netflix and chill socks.
The problem with that is that, A, you're not watching us. B, you're not watching the morning news because you have your TV set to a different input. So it's not like turn it on. However, I think Netflix, we're reaching kind of an interesting tipping point for Netflix, because they have invested something north of $6 billion on creating content, original content. the thing is now, like, I am a Netflix subscriber. I tune in. I log on, and it's overwhelming. There's so much content, and a lot of it is targeted to me because they know what other content I've been watching. So they're using their algorithms.
Watched this. I would suggest you watch
exactly
the next 10.
And the thing is that the ratings are not very good on some of these shows. And you might watch for 10 minutes and then you're like, this isn't my cup of tea. And that's one area where the networks have an advantage right now because there's limited airtime, unless you're CBS with their all access platform. The traditional broadcast, we only have so many hours, 15 hours of prime time every Monday through Friday.
Right.
So they're curating the best of that content. And when you watch a network show in the evening now, well, that's going to be pretty good because, the alternative is...
Well, there's a finite amount that somebody is, as you indicated before, producing, directing, executing to get the best of the best.
But then the struggle is with, Netflix, you can put anything on there. There's no TV rating system. There's no FCC to get you in trouble. The length can be any length that they want for these programs. Right. So it is kind of confining, in the network broadcast environment right now. But we're hanging on, the industry is.
Well, the industry is hanging on, but I think as you indicated at KHQ, you're not only hanging on, you're leading in the ratings and doing a great job.
And we're trying to go where the puck is going. You mentioned a couple of the things that we're doing to kind of rise to the occasion. Just last week or 2 weeks ago, we launched really the first of its kind in the nation, which is an e-gaming channel for Twitch, which is a platform where people watch other people play video games.
I've read articles, actually, in the New Yorker had a specific article that is the next platform, that folks might be at the Spokane Arena, 15,000 seats, etc., watching somebody play a game. It's shocking to me, but...
Me too. I mean, we're of that age, that generation. It's like, well, if I'm not playing, I'm surely not going to watch somebody else play.
Hashtag Atari.
Yeah, exactly. Or the Nintendo Classic, where you're like, come on, it's my turn. Give me the remote.
Now we're buying tickets to watch.
It's crazy, but... from our perspective, we feel like we can fill a niche there, and we can come up with programming to reach that audience, the Generation Z audience, which is younger than the age of 23.
And it's real.
It's real.
So despite us intrigued by it, it's real.
Mocking.
It's real. The numbers are proving to be that's something that target market is interested in.
Right now, there's likely 1 million or more people on Twitch watching other people play video games at this very second that we're talking, and that's just startling. That's a million people. That's like a prime time number in terms of audience nowadays.
Neal, thank you for joining us. We'll have you come back, and this is a topic that is very fascinating to me, and I appreciate your insight.
My pleasure, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
Business Talks is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. Business Talks is brought to you by our friends at STCU and Well Dressed Walrus. Business Talks wishes you good business and a good day.